Welcome to Fog Street Mysteries, where every story begins in shadows and every clue glows under a single street lamp. Here, classic noir meets modern storytelling, filled with sharp detectives, haunted secrets, impossible crimes, and twists waiting at every corner. If you love fog-soaked alleys, tense interrogations, and the electric thrill of unraveling a mystery, you're in the right place. Step inside, the next case is already waiting. Don't forget to share thoughts. Your feedback keeps the mystery alive. Now let's begin. Nero Wolfe and the Broken Inheritance. Nero Wolfe solves a deadly will. Chapter 1, The Will That Didn't Fit. I was halfway through a perfectly respectable Tuesday, meaning no bodies, no hysterics, and no reason for Nero Wolfe to interrupt his beer, when the doorbell rang with the kind of insistence that tells you trouble has good timing. That it was 10 minutes to 11. That matters in Wolfe's house. At 11 sharp, Fritz would appear like a benevolent executioner to announce lunch. Anyone arriving before that had better be worth delaying a sauce. Wolfe didn't move. He never does at the bell. He sat in his red leather chair like a monument to human inertia, fingers steepled, eyes half-lidded, orchids perfuming the air with the faint, smug scent of discipline. That I sighed, closed my notebook, and stood. If this is another woman who's lost her parakeet, I said, I'm sending her to animal control. Wolfe opened one eye. Archie, if you permit frivolity to interfere with punctuality, you will eat alone. That was as close to encouragement as I was going to get. I went to the door. The man on the stoop looked like he'd been ironed that morning and folded badly by noon. Gray suit, conservative tie, thin mouth, eyes that had learned long ago how to keep secrets in charge by the hour. Archibald Goodwin, he asked. Sometimes. When I'm in trouble. I am Martin Hale. Attorney at law. He paused, as if waiting for applause. I represent the estate of the late Edmund R. Calder. That name rang a bell. Heavy industry, steel components, labor fights, and a face that showed up on business pages when money moved and men got quiet. Calder had died 3 nights ago. Officially, it was a heart attack. Officially is a word that often limps. That I stepped aside. Come in. You're just in time to ruin lunch. Wolfe regarded Hale as one might regard a fly that has landed on a rare orchid, not with panic, but with a calculation of effort. Hale sat when I pointed, on the edge of his chair, briefcase clutched like a flotation device. I have come, Hale said, because there are irregularities. Wolfe's eyebrows twitched. That's the Wolfe equivalent of a trumpet fanfare. Proceed, Wolfe said. But be concise. You have precisely 9 minutes. Hale opened the briefcase and removed a sheaf of papers bound with a blue ribbon. He handled them tenderly, like a man introducing a problem child to a strict schoolmaster. This is the last will and testament of Edmund R. Calder, he said. Executed 6 months ago. Perfectly legal. Perfectly witnessed. Perfectly, he stopped. But? I said, because someone had to, but it does not fit. Wolfe leaned back a fraction of an inch. Elaborate. Hale swallowed. Mr. Calder was methodical. Predictable in his personal arrangements, if not in business. For decades, his estate planning followed a clear logic. His son, Jonathan Calder, was to inherit controlling interest in Calder Industrial. His daughter, Lillian, estranged for years, was to receive a fixed trust. His longtime secretary, Miss Vera Klein, a generous annuity. This was known. Expected. And? Wolfe said, and this will reverses the emphasis. Hale slid the document forward. The bulk of the liquid assets, cash, securities, go to Miss Klein. The daughter receives a significantly expanded share. The son is left with voting stock encumbered by restrictions that make effective control nearly impossible. I whistled softly. That's one way to start a family reunion. Wolfe ignored me. Is there any indication of coercion? Incompetence? None, Hale said quickly. Mr. Calder was alert, firm, decisive. He discussed the changes calmly. Too calmly. That got Wolfe's attention. His eyes sharpened, like a blade finding its angle. "Mr. Hale," Wolfe said, "you are troubled not because the will is illegal, but because it is illogical." "Yes," Hale said, relief flooding his voice. "Precisely." Wolfe nodded once. "And now Mr. Calder is dead." "Yes." "How?" Hale hesitated. "A heart attack. At his study desk. Late evening. Alone." "Alone is a condition often exaggerated," Wolfe said. I watched Hale's fingers tighten on the briefcase handle. There it was, the first crack. "People always show you where it hurts if you wait," Wolfe continued. "Why have you come to me instead of the police?" "Because," Hale said, "the police will look for a crime. I am not yet certain there is one." Wolfe smiled faintly. "That's never a good sign, Mr. Hale," he said. "A will that does not fit is like a shoe of the wrong size. Someone limps. Someone bleeds. And someone notices. Archie, take the document." I did, scanning quickly. It was neat. Clean. Clauses stacked like bricks. But something bothered me, and I didn't know what yet. "That bothered me more. There's a clause here," I said, tapping the page, "about an advisory committee. 3 names. The son, the secretary, and a business partner, Samuel Breen." Hale nodded. "Yes. Mr. Breen has been with Calder Industrial since the early days. And now he gets a say without owning much," I said. "That's cozy." Wolfe's eyes closed. "Mr. Hale, did Mr. Calder ever discuss why he made these changes?" "He said," Hale replied slowly, "I have corrected an imbalance." That was his phrase. Wolfe opened his eyes. "An imbalance presupposes a scale. And scales are tipped deliberately." The clock chimed 11. Right on time. Fritz's footsteps approached like fate. Wolfe sighed. "Mr. Hale, you will leave the documents. Archie will accompany you later to gather statements. For now, you will depart. Lunch awaits." Hale blinked. "You'll take the case?" Wolfe looked at him over steepled fingers. "I will consider it. That depends on whether Mr. Calder died of a heart attack, or of conscience." Hale stood, dazed but hopeful, and left. Fritz entered with the serene confidence of a man carrying perfection on a tray. As Wolfe turned his attention to food, I leaned closer. "You smell something, don't you?" Wolfe chewed thoughtfully. "Yes. Fear." "From whom?" Wolfe swallowed. "From everyone who benefited. And especially from the one who did not." I sat back, grinning despite myself. Outside, a taxi horn blared. Somewhere downtown, a family was sharpening knives over money that had outlived its owner by 3 days, and we hadn't even left the house yet. That's when the phone rang. Chapter 2, The Heirs in Conflict. When a rich man dies, New York does what it always does. It keeps moving, keeps honking, keeps selling hot chestnuts on cold corners, while a small circle of people suddenly discovers they've been carrying knives in their pockets for years and calling them handkerchiefs. Wolfe had taken exactly 1 hour after lunch to sit in his chair, drink his beer, and glare at the will as if it were personally insulting his ancestry. That was my cue. "Archie," he said, voice smooth and heavy, "you will go and speak to the heirs." I adjusted my tie in a mirror that didn't deserve the indignity. "All of them. All who matter." His eyes narrowed. "And you will not be charmed. You will not be bullied. And you will not eat in any establishment that serves coffee as an apology." "Yes, sir." He added, almost casually, "Observe their language when they mention a particular date. Find it." I paused. "What date?" "That," Wolfe said, "is precisely why you will go." It was the closest thing Wolfe ever gave to affection. A problem with my name on it. 10 minutes later I was in a taxi, heading downtown, the driver narrating his own tragedy while I stared out at wet pavement and storefront reflections. Mid-century Manhattan always looked like it was keeping a secret. The brownstones did it politely. The alleys did it with enthusiasm. The Calder mansion sat on the Upper East Side like a rich old dowager with a locked jaw. Black iron fence, stone steps, and windows that looked out the way bankers look at beggars. Martin Hale met me at the door, stiff as yesterday's toast. "They're in the drawing room," he said, voice low. "It's tense." "Tense is good," I told him. "It keeps people honest. Or at least sweaty." He didn't smile. Lawyers don't waste smiles. They bill for them. The drawing room had the kind of furniture that looks uncomfortable on purpose, so nobody forgets who paid for the upholstery. 3 people stood in a loose triangle, each pretending not to study the other 2. That I identified them instantly, because money leaves a residue and so do family grudges. Jonathan Calder, late 30s, polished, jaw tight, the kind of handsome that comes from private schools and never being told no by anyone except a banker. He was holding a glass he hadn't touched. Lillian Calder, early 30s, cigarette in hand, too composed for a grieving daughter, eyes sharp like she'd learned to survive by cutting first. She was dressed impeccably in black, but the black looked like a choice, not a mourning. And Vera Klein, mid-40s, neat, controlled, with a face that had practiced neutrality until it became permanent. She sat on the edge of a couch as if the cushions might accuse her of something. Her hands were folded in her lap like a prayer. Samuel Breen was not present. Yet. I could feel him like a missing tooth that I walked in as if I owned the place. It's a habit. If you don't act like you belong, people start asking why you're there, and I prefer to ask the questions. "Good afternoon," I said. "Archie Goodwin. I work with Nero Wolfe." Jonathan's eyes flicked. "Wolfe? The detective?" "More of a genius with a chair," I said. "But yes." Lillian exhaled smoke. "So we've hired a celebrity to decide who gets father's money." Vera's eyes widened slightly, then settled. That I didn't like the way she watched the door every few seconds. "Not exactly," I said. "Mr. Hale asked us to look at irregularities. The will is legal. But Wolfe doesn't enjoy anything that looks like it's wearing the wrong suit." Jonathan's mouth tightened. "This isn't about suits. It's about theft." Lillian gave him a cool glance. "Try not to break your teeth on that word, Jonathan. You've never used it before." I held up a hand. "Let's make it simple. Each of you tell me 2 things, your relationship with Edmund Calder in the last 6 months, and your understanding of why the will changed." Jonathan answered first, because entitled people always do. "My relationship was fine," he said stiffly. "I ran operations at Calder Industrial. Father trusted me." Then, his gaze slid toward Vera and bounced off her like a pebble off marble. "Then he made this absurd change." "Absurd," I repeated. "Did he explain it?" Jonathan's nostrils flared. "He said it was necessary. He wouldn't discuss details. He was distracted." "Distracted by what?" Jonathan hesitated. His eyes flicked to the mantel clock. "By nonsense. By old matters." There it was, the first dodge. The date Wolfe had mentioned without mentioning. Jonathan wasn't avoiding a date yet, he was avoiding a category, old matters. I turned to Lillian. "Your turn." She leaned back, smoke curling like a question mark. "I hadn't seen him for years." "Not really. We exchanged letters. Sometimes." Her voice stayed smooth, but her fingers tightened around a cigarette. "In the last 6 months." I pressed. "I saw him twice," she said. "Once in June." "Once in," she stopped, "once in." I prompted gently. She took a drag, eyes narrowing. "Once in September." Jonathan's head snapped up. Vera's hands tightened. "September." My brain filed it away. Wolfe would like that, and why did the will change? I asked. Lillian's mouth curved. Because he finally remembered he had a daughter. Jonathan barked a humorless laugh. "Don't play the wounded bird. You left." Lillian's eyes sharpened. I was pushed. The air tightened. Hale cleared his throat like a man trying to cough out a lawsuit. I shifted to Vera. "Miss Klein." Her voice was quiet. Mr. Calder was, under stress. From what? She looked at her hands. From the company. From family matters. From, something he didn't speak about. Did he seem afraid? She hesitated half a second too long. No, I smiled politely. That was a good half second. But it wasn't honest. Her cheeks colored. She opened her mouth, closed it, and finally said, he checked the locks at night. Jonathan scoffed. He was old. He liked order. Old men don't start checking locks unless they expect someone to turn the handle, I said. The room went quieter. A door opened somewhere behind us. Footsteps approached, measured, confident, expensive. Samuel Breen entered like a man arriving at his own funeral to confirm the seating chart. Mid-50s, broad shoulders, clean hairline that suggested money spent wisely, and eyes that didn't blink enough. He looked at me. Who are you? Archie Goodwin, I said. Wolfe's legman. I ask questions. Sometimes people answer. Breen's mouth twitched. I don't like detectives. That's okay, I said. They're not a popular food group. He ignored me and turned to Hale. This is unnecessary. Hale stiffened. Mr. Breen, it may prevent litigation. Or worse. Breen's eyes flicked to the trio. The will is clear. Calder was clear. You mean clear like a window, Lillian said, or clear like a knife? Breen's gaze slid over her. Watch your mouth. I stepped between them with a smile. Mr. Breen, quick questions. You were named on the advisory committee. Did that surprise you? No, he said flatly. Why not? Because he was ready for that one. Edmund trusted me. Did he trust you in September? The word landed like a dropped glass. Jonathan stiffened. Lillian's cigarette trembled slightly. Vera's eyes widened, then dropped. Breen's face didn't change. But something in his posture did, a tiny shift, like a man moving his weight off a sore foot. I don't recall dates, he said. That's interesting, I said. Because everyone else here does. They just don't enjoy saying them. Silence. In that silence, I heard a clock tick. I also heard a lie settle into place. I left them there, simmering. Outside, the city slapped me with cold air and taxi exhaust. I walked 2 blocks to a diner that Wolfe would hate on principle and ordered coffee that apologized in advance. Then I found a pay phone and called home. Wolfe answered on the second ring, which meant he had been waiting. Well, he demanded. They hate each other, I said. Which narrows it down to, everyone. Dates, Wolfe said. September came up, I told him. Lillian saw Calder then. Breen refuses to recall dates. Vera says Calder started checking locks at night. Jonathan says old matters, like a man stepping around a hole in the sidewalk. There was a pause. I could almost smell the orchids through the phone line. Good, Wolfe said softly. Very good. What's good about it? I asked. September, Wolfe said. Is when an imbalance becomes intolerable. And what imbalance is that? I asked. Wolfe's voice hardened. You will find out. Continue. And Archie, yeah. Do not permit them to herd you into their narrative. I grinned into the booth. Boss, if I let people herd me, I'd be a dairy product by now. I hung up. Outside, the diner window reflected my face, and for a second I looked like a man who had stepped into something deep and sticky. Somewhere in that mansion, Edmund Calder's study sat empty, quiet, and officially innocent. Officially. Chapter 3, The House That Remembers. If houses could talk, the Calder mansion would have needed a lawyer before it opened its mouth. I went back the next morning with Hale's reluctant blessing and a key that felt heavier than it looked. New York was doing its usual impersonation of indifference. Taxis splashing yesterday's rain, men in hats pretending not to notice each other, but the mansion sat there like it was holding its breath. Inside, the air smelled of furniture polish, old money, and something else underneath, metallic and sour, like fear that hadn't quite dissipated. The housekeeper, Mrs. Donnelly, hovered as I stepped in. She had the face of a woman who had seen too many families fall apart over dinner tables. "I won't be long," I told her. "Just sightseeing." She didn't smile. "The study is upstairs." "That's where she stopped herself. "That's where Mr. Calder worked." "Worked," I repeated. "Sure." The stairs creaked in a way that suggested they remembered better days. "I like old houses, they don't bother pretending they're innocent." The study door was closed. That mattered. Doors close themselves when people want to keep something in, or out. Inside, the room was large, orderly, and quietly offended at the idea of chaos. Heavy desk. Leather chair. Built-in shelves filled with books that looked more consulted than read. A window overlooked the street, curtains drawn halfway like eyelids that refused to shut. This was where Edmund Calder had died. Officially that I walked slowly, letting the room talk. The desk was neat, too neat. No scattered papers, no half-finished notes. A man who worked late would leave something behind, a smudge, a pencil out of place, a thought abandoned mid-sentence. That I leaned closer. The desk blotter had a faint indentation, as if something had been pressed there repeatedly. A paperweight? No. Too irregular. That I opened drawers. Office supplies. Correspondence. Nothing exciting enough to kill four. Then I noticed the safe. It was built into the wall behind a painting, a tasteful landscape that probably cost more than my first car. The safe door hung open, empty. No signs of forced entry. Whoever opened it had known the combination, or had time to persuade someone who did. That I whistled softly. "That's interesting." "Sir." Mrs. Donnelly's voice floated from the hall. "Nervous?" "Nothing," I called back. "Just admiring the craftsmanship." I closed the safe gently and stepped back. If something was missing, it wasn't money. Money leaves paperwork when it goes. This felt more personal. On the desk sat a framed photograph, Calder with a younger Jonathan, both smiling stiffly, like men posing for a contract. Beside it, another frame, Calder and a woman I recognized as Lillian, younger, happier, her hand resting on his arm. That one was face down. That I picked it up and studied it. Dustless. Recently handled. Someone had turned it over on purpose. That's when I saw the scuff marks on the floor near the desk chair, slight, irregular. Not the sort you get from a man collapsing gently from a heart attack. More like the furniture had been nudged. Or shoved. That I made notes. Wolfe loved notes. He loved them almost as much as he hated leaving the house. Down the hall was the bedroom. Bed neatly made. Nightstand bare except for a lamp and a book, unread, spine unbroken. No sign of struggle. No sign of illness either. Pills neatly arranged, untouched. Then the locked cabinet. That it took longer than I liked to get it open, but patience has never been my strongest virtue. Inside were files, personal, business, medical, and an empty folder labeled, in Calder's precise hand, "Will original, draft." I stared at it. "Of course," I muttered. That would be missing. Someone had taken the handwritten draft, the thinking version, the one that would explain motives, hesitations, changes. The will that didn't fit had once fit perfectly, until someone made sure it didn't. I closed the cabinet and went back downstairs. Mrs. Donnelly was waiting like a jury foreman. "Did you find what you were looking for?" she asked. "Not yet," I said. But someone else did. Outside, the day had turned gray, as if the city had lost interest. I hailed a taxi and gave Wolfe's address. The driver glanced at me in the mirror. "Big house," he said. "Trouble?" "Always," I replied. "That's why they build them." Back at the brownstone, the orchids hit me first, humid, sharp, alive. Wolfe sat in his chair, immovable as ever, a glass of beer at hand. He didn't look up. "Report," he said. That I handed him my notes. The study was too neat. Safe open. No forced entry. Original handwritten. Will draft missing. Wolfe's fingers steepled. Predictable. "Oh," I said. "Then you've been holding out on me." He sniffed. A man who revises his will so radically will preserve his reasoning. Unless he fears it will be discovered. By whom? I asked. That, Wolfe said, is why you were sent. I told him about the scuff marks, the overturned photograph, the empty folder. When I finished, Wolfe closed his eyes. The house remembers, he murmured. And it remembers contradiction. Meaning? Meaning, Wolfe said, opening his eyes, that Mr. Calder was not alone when he died. Nor was he unprepared. The phone rang. I answered. Inspector Kramer's voice growled through the line. Goodwin. I hear you've been poking around a death I'm calling natural. Natural is a flexible word, I said. Like, harmless. You got something? Maybe, I said. Or maybe someone else has it. Kramer snorted. You always say that. Because it's usually true. I hung up and looked at Wolfe. Kramer's circling. Let him, Wolfe said. He is useful pressure. I paced. Someone took that draft will. Someone knew it mattered. Someone also knew Calder checked locks at night. Yes, Wolfe said. Fear leaves routines behind. And September? I asked. What happened then? Wolfe lifted his beer. September, he said slowly, is when one ceases to tolerate a lie. The doorbell rang. That I answered to find Samuel Breen on the stoop, hat in hand, expression carefully neutral. I'd like to speak with Mr. Wolfe, he said. That I smiled. Join the line. Inside, Breen sat stiffly, eyes flicking to the orchids as if they might be listening. I've been advised, Breen said, that this investigation may complicate matters. Wolfe regarded him coolly. Truth often does. Breen swallowed. Edmund Calder was a difficult man. Indeed, Wolfe said. So are men who survive him. Breen's jaw tightened. If you're implying, I am implying nothing, Wolfe said. I am observing. Silence stretched. Breen shifted. I was with Calder in September, he said suddenly. We argued. About control. About the company's future. Wolfe nodded. And he said he had corrected an imbalance. The phrase again. And did you agree with his correction? Wolfe asked. Breen hesitated. No. When Breen left, the house felt quieter, as if something had been disturbed. I looked at Wolfe. He gave you September. Yes, Wolfe said. Voluntarily. Which makes it less valuable. You think the original draft will explains it all? I asked. Wolfe shook his head. No. It explains enough. Outside, night settled over the city like a familiar coat. Somewhere, someone was holding a piece of paper that could shatter a family, or protect one. And Edmund Calder's house, empty now, remembered every step taken inside it. Chapter 4, Wolfe Smells a Lie. If Nero Wolfe ever writes a memoir, which will happen the same day he runs the New York Marathon, there will be a chapter titled The Virtue of Staying Put. The man believes motion is a moral weakness. He also believes lies have a smell. That afternoon he sat in his red leather chair like a Buddha with a better vocabulary, orchids steaming gently behind him, beer within reach, eyes half-lidded in a way that suggested either meditation or murder, mental, not physical. I paced. We make a good pair that way. Stop, Wolfe said. I wasn't doing anything, I protested. You were committing locomotion, he replied. It distracts me. I sat. The chair creaked in surrender. Wolfe tapped the will with a thick finger. This document contains a clause that offends me. That narrows it down to the whole thing, I said. He ignored me. Clause 9. Subsection C. The advisory committee's power to defer liquidation of certain assets. Sounds boring, I said. Which makes it dangerous. Precisely, Wolfe said. It is unnecessary. Redundant. Mr. Calder had no reason to include it, unless he anticipated resistance. From Jonathan, I said. Or Breen. Or both, Wolfe said. But the clause protects neither. It protects time. I leaned forward. Time for what? Wolfe's eyes opened fully. For someone to act. The phone rang. I answered. Hale's voice, tight as a necktie at a wake. There's been an incident, he said. Define incident, I said. Miss Klein, he said. She collapsed. At the office. Collapsed how? I asked. Fainted, Hale said quickly. Doctor says exhaustion. Wolfe gestured. I covered the receiver. Vera Klein fainted, I told him. Wolfe nodded. Expected. I blinked. You were expecting her to faint? Yes, Wolfe said calmly. Fear requires release. I got Hale back. Where is she now? At home, he said. Resting. We'll pay a visit, I said. Tell her to keep the door unlocked. We're polite, not patient. We hung up. I grabbed my coat. Wolfe didn't move. You're not coming? I asked. Of course not, he said. I am engaged in thinking. You do that everywhere, I muttered. Which is why, Wolfe said, I succeed. Outside, the city was slipping into evening, lights blinking on like nervous thoughts. I took a cab downtown, the driver humming something mournful. New York has a soundtrack, it's mostly regret and ambition in equal measure. Vera Klein lived in a modest apartment that smelled faintly of lemon polish and order. She answered the door herself, pale but composed, like a woman determined not to spill anything important. Mr. Goodwin, she said. I didn't expect. No one ever does, I said. May I come in? She nodded. Inside, everything had its place. Too much so. People who control chaos at home usually can't control it elsewhere. You fainted, I said. She sat, smoothing her skirt. I was overwhelmed. By what? By accusations. Whose? She hesitated. Jonathan's. What did he accuse you of? Her eyes flicked to the window. Influencing Mr. Calder. And did you? She met my gaze. I advised him. About the will? I asked. About life, she said quietly. I let that sit. Did Mr. Calder tell you why he changed it? She swallowed. He said it was to prevent harm. To whom? Her hands tightened. To himself. That was new. I filed it. September, I said casually. Her breath caught. Just a hitch. But it was there. He was frightened, she said. Something happened then. He wouldn't tell me what. Only that he had trusted the wrong person. Did he say who? No, she said. But he started locking doors. Checking windows. He asked me if documents could disappear. Could they? I asked. She hesitated. Yes. Did any? She looked at me for a long moment. I don't know. I stood. Rest, I said. But don't pretend. It's exhausting. Back at the brownstone, Wolfe was waiting like a spider who'd felt a vibration on the web. Well, he said. Vera says Calder trusted the wrong person, I reported. September again. Fear. Documents disappearing. Did she faint because she is ill, Wolfe asked, or because she is complicit? Or because she's terrified, I said. Wolfe nodded. All three may be true. The doorbell rang. Inspector Kramer barged in without waiting for my invitation. He had the look of a man who'd been chewing gravel. Wolfe, he growled, you're interfering. Wolfe raised an eyebrow. I am investigating. Calder died of a heart attack, Kramer said. Medical examiner confirms it. Death is not the crime, Wolfe said mildly. Manipulation is. Kramer snorted. You've got no proof. Yet, Wolfe said. Kramer jabbed a finger. You keep poking and I'll charge someone just to shut you up. Wolfe smiled faintly. Choose carefully. You may select the wrong beneficiary. Kramer stared, then left, slamming the door like punctuation. I looked at Wolfe. You're enjoying this. No, Wolfe said. I am irritated. By what? By a man who rearranged his affairs to reveal a truth, and was silenced before he could. You think Calder was murdered, I said. I think, Wolfe said, that a heart attack can be assisted. The phone rang again. This time it was Jonathan Calder. His voice was tight, controlled, angry. I want this stopped, he said. You're stirring things up. Things were already stirred, I said. We're just looking at the spoon. There's nothing to find, he snapped. Then you won't mind if we keep looking, I said. He hung up. Wolfe listened to the dial tone through the receiver I hadn't yet replaced. Jonathan is frightened, Wolfe said. But not surprised. Meaning? I asked. Meaning he anticipated scrutiny, Wolfe said. Which suggests foreknowledge. I sat back. So what now? Wolfe leaned forward, eyes sharp. Now, he said, we provoke. Who? The one least able to endure it, Wolfe said. Arrange for Mr. Breen to hear that the original draft of the will has been found. I grinned. But it hasn't. Indeed, Wolfe said. That is the point. I stood. You're wicked. I am logical, Wolfe replied. Night settled in. The orchids exhaled. Somewhere in the city, a man would soon discover whether his composure could survive a lie told convincingly enough. And if it couldn't, the house that remembered would finally get a voice. Chapter 5, The First Crack. If lies were china plates, we'd been tapping them with a spoon all week, listening for the one that rang false. Wolfe, of course, insisted on doing the tapping from his chair, while I risked my knuckles in the field. It's a division of labor that has kept us solvent and mostly alive. The rumor Wolfe ordered me to release, that the original handwritten draft of Edmund Calder's will had been found, moved through the city with the speed of bad news and the appetite of gossip. Lawyers whispered. Phones rang late. People who had been confident yesterday developed sudden allergies to conversation. By evening, the crack appeared. It came in the form of Martin Hale, standing in our front hall like a man who'd misplaced his conscience and hoped we'd found it. I was told, Hale said tightly, that you have obtained a document. Wolfe didn't look up from his beer. You were told correctly, or incorrectly. The distinction is immaterial. Hale swallowed. This is serious, Mr. Wolfe. So is ignorance, Wolfe replied. Sit down. Hale sat. I leaned against the wall, arms crossed, enjoying the view. Lawyers under pressure develop interesting facial tics. An envelope, Hale said, reaching into his briefcase. It was delivered to my office this afternoon. No return address. No note. He placed it on Wolfe's desk like an offering to a deity that had already decided his fate. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. Archie. I opened it carefully. Inside was a single folded letter, yellowed, handwritten in Edmund Calder's precise, disciplined script. The date at the top made my eyebrows climb. September 14th. Well, I said. That's cooperative. Wolfe held out his hand. I gave him the letter. He read slowly, lips barely moving, the room thick with orchid-scented suspense. What does it say? Hale demanded. Wolfe ignored him. When he finished, he folded the letter once and placed it beside the will. This, Wolfe said, is indeed a crack. But not the fracture. I couldn't help myself. Translation. Wolfe sighed. Mr. Hale, this letter confirms that Mr. Calder revised his will deliberately. It references an imbalance, again, and an intention to protect himself from consequences already set in motion. Hale's face tightened. Protect himself from whom? Wolfe lifted his beer. That question is unanswered. I took the letter back and read it myself. Calder wrote about regret, about trusting the wrong counsel, about realizing too late that control could be weaponized. He named no one. That omission screamed louder than an accusation. It feels unfinished, I said. Like he meant to write more. Or like he was interrupted, Wolfe said quietly. The phone rang. I answered. Jonathan Calder's voice came sharp and brittle. I want to see that letter. Which one? I asked pleasantly. We're developing a collection. You have no right. You'll have plenty of rights, I said. After we're done. He hung up. Again. Wolfe watched me replace the receiver. Jonathan's impatience is instructive. Or entitled, I said. Entitlement, Wolfe replied, is merely impatience with a pedigree. The next call came from Inspector Kramer. His tone suggested ulcers. You stirring the pot again, Wolfe? Merely heating it, Wolfe said. Someone leaked that letter, Kramer said. Now everyone's lawyered up. Excellent, Wolfe said. They will speak less freely. And that helps how? Kramer snapped. Because, Wolfe said calmly, people who speak less reveal more in what they choose to say. Kramer hung up with a noise like a filing cabinet falling downstairs. I looked at Wolfe. So the letter proves Calder was scared. It also proves the will wasn't random. But it doesn't give us a villain. Precisely, Wolfe said. Which is why it is only a crack. Night settled in like an unwanted guest. I went out to stretch my legs and my patience, ending up at a diner where the coffee tasted like it had once known beans. I watched reflections in the window, hats, coats, hurried lives, and thought about September. When I got back, Wolfe was on the phone, his voice low and deliberate. Yes, he said. Tomorrow afternoon. All of them. The brownstone. Tell them it concerns the letter. He hung up and regarded me. We will have our audience, he said. The next afternoon, they arrived one by one, each wearing a different version of confidence. Jonathan Calder came first, jaw set, eyes sharp. Lillian followed, cool and distant, cigarette unlit but present. Vera Klein arrived quietly, pale but composed. Samuel Breen came last, expression carefully neutral, like a man attending a meeting he'd already rehearsed. Wolfe surveyed them from his chair like a judge who'd read the verdict but enjoyed the argument. I have here, Wolfe said, a letter written by Edmund Calder in September. Jonathan leaned forward. You have no. Sit, Wolfe said. Jonathan sat. Wolfe continued, this letter confirms that the will was altered intentionally, in response to an imbalance Calder believed dangerous. Breen's eyes flicked, just once, to Vera. Wolfe noticed. So did I. It does not, Wolfe said, name the source of that danger. Lillian exhaled smoke. So why are we here? Because, Wolfe said, someone here knows what Calder feared. Silence thickened. Vera spoke softly. He feared exposure. Jonathan snapped, exposure of what? Vera looked at him. You never asked. Jonathan's face flushed. This is absurd. Is it? Wolfe said mildly. Mr. Calder's company faced certain regulatory vulnerabilities last year. Decisions were made. Advice was given. Documents were drafted. Breen stiffened. You're speculating. On the contrary, Wolfe said. I am observing that Mr. Calder sought to limit control, not distribute wealth. A curious priority. Jonathan stood. This is harassment. Wolfe's voice hardened. Sit down. Jonathan hesitated, then sat. That hesitation was another crack. Wolfe leaned back. Someone advised Mr. Calder in September in a manner that endangered him. Someone whose influence required correction. The will was that correction. I watched their faces. Lillian's eyes were thoughtful, not shocked. Vera looked relieved, almost. Breen looked irritated. Jonathan looked angry and scared. The letter had done its work. It hadn't broken anything open, but it had weakened the seams. After they left, the house felt lighter, as if it had exhaled. "You see," Wolfe said to me. "Truth does not announce itself. It fractures resistance." I nodded. "But the letter doesn't tell us who pushed Calder, or how hard." Wolfe smiled faintly. "No. But it tells us who reacted." Outside, the city hummed. Somewhere, a man who thought he'd buried the past was discovering that paper has a long memory. And the inheritance, already broken, was beginning to cut. Chapter 6, The Inheritance That Never Existed. By the time you reach the 6th day of circling a mystery, the lies stop behaving like lies and start acting like furniture, solid, familiar, and dangerous to trip over if you forget where they are. Wolfe, of course, never forgot. He merely waited until the furniture rearranged itself out of panic. That morning he was in his chair early, beer untouched, orchids breathing damp authority into the room. That alone told me something was about to happen. "Archie," he said without looking at me, "the inheritance is a fiction." I blinked. "You want to unpack that with nouns and verbs?" "The money," Wolfe said. "The stock. The percentages. All of it. A distraction." I leaned against the desk. "You're saying Calder didn't care who got what?" "On the contrary," Wolfe said. "He cared very much. Which is why he designed a will that would fail." "Fail how?" "Emotionally," Wolfe replied. "Not legally." That was Wolfe at his most irritating, when he had the whole picture and let me stare at a corner of it like an idiot. "Try again," I said. Slowly. Wolfe folded his hands. Edmund Calder was not distributing wealth. He was removing power. The will was not an inheritance, it was a trap. For whom? For the person who believed the company could not survive without their control, Wolfe said. The one who would panic when that control was diluted. I thought about Jonathan's flushed anger. Breen's irritation. Vera's fear. Lillian's watchful calm. So the inheritance never existed, I said slowly. Just the illusion of one. Precisely, Wolfe said. And illusions are dangerous when people kill to preserve them. The phone rang. I answered. It was Vera Klein. Her voice was low, tight. "Mr. Goodwin, someone has been in my apartment." That got my attention. "Recently?" "Yes," she said. "Nothing taken. But papers disturbed." "Which papers?" I asked. A pause. "Old correspondence. From September." I grabbed my coat. "Don't touch anything. I'm on my way." Wolfe watched me go with an expression of grim satisfaction. "Observe carefully," he said. "Fear accelerates error." Vera's apartment looked the same as before, neat, controlled, but the air was wrong. Drawers had been opened and closed too carefully. Someone had searched without wanting it noticed. Who knew about those papers? I asked. She hesitated. Mr. Breen. Only him. Anne. Jonathan, she admitted. He asked once. Recently? Yes, she said. After the letter surfaced. I knelt by the desk. One drawer stuck slightly. Inside were letters, copies, not originals. Calder's handwriting again. Cautious. Regretful. Still no names. But one envelope was missing. This was here, Vera said softly, pointing. A letter he told me to keep separate. Did you read it? I asked. She shook her head. He asked me not to. Did he say why? He said, she replied, because if I am wrong, it will ruin someone. If I am right, it will ruin more. I straightened. That's very Calder. And very frightening, she said. I called Wolfe from the hallway. Someone searched Vera's apartment, I said. Took a single letter. September again. Then the trap is tightening, Wolfe said. Excellent. Excellent. I repeated. Someone's rummaging through apartments. Because, Wolfe said calmly, they fear the truth more than exposure. When I got back to the brownstone, Wolfe was eating as if digestion were a moral imperative. Fritz hovered like a benevolent tyrant. You were right, I told Wolfe. The inheritance is secondary. Everyone's terrified of September. Yes, Wolfe said. September is when Mr. Calder realized the inheritance did not matter. Then what did? Responsibility, Wolfe said. And guilt. That evening, Inspector Kramer arrived again, coat collar up, temper down but simmering. You better start talking, Wolfe, he said. Things are moving. They always do, Wolfe replied. Someone broke into Klein's place, Kramer said. Now that's obstruction at least. Indeed, Wolfe said. And desperation. Kramer frowned. You got a suspect? I have several candidates for anxiety, Wolfe said. Not yet for arrest. Kramer leaned closer. You think Calder was murdered? I think, Wolfe said evenly, that Calder discovered something in September that rendered his previous life arrangements untenable. He altered his will to neutralize a threat. That threat responded. Kramer stared. That's thin. It will thicken, Wolfe said. After Kramer left, Wolfe motioned me closer. Tomorrow, he said, you will visit the Calder Company offices. Ask about September. About decisions. About who argued most strenuously against restraint. I sighed. More field work. Your role is indispensable, Wolfe said. I would perish of boredom without you. That was praise. The next day I did as ordered. Calder Industrial was a temple of glass and steel and people who smiled like it was part of their job description. September had been busy, they told me. Regulatory reviews. Strategic disagreements. A push for expansion someone had resisted. Who resisted? I asked. They exchanged looks. Mr. Calder himself, one executive said. And, briefly, Miss Calder. That surprised me. Lillian. She argued against aggressive moves, the man said. Said the company couldn't afford certain risks. And who pushed for them? I asked. The answer came with reluctance. Jonathan. And Mr. Breen. By the time I got back to Wolfe, the city lights were on and my patience was frayed. So Calder blocks a risky move in September, I said. Lillian supports him. Jonathan and Breen push back. Calder revises the will to cut control. Someone panics. Yes, Wolfe said. But note, Calder did not expose the wrongdoing. He merely prepared. Why? I asked. Because, Wolfe said, exposure would destroy the company. Calder chose containment. And someone chose elimination, I said. Wolfe's eyes gleamed. Now you are thinking. The doorbell rang again, this time Jonathan Calder himself, face pale, eyes bright with fury. I want this stopped, he demanded. You're tearing everything apart. Wolfe regarded him coolly. You misunderstand, Mr. Calder. It was already torn. Jonathan laughed bitterly. There was no inheritance. Not really. Just manipulation. Wolfe smiled faintly. Indeed. Jonathan froze. The silence stretched. Then Jonathan realized what he'd said. He left shortly after, without another word. I looked at Wolfe. That sounded like a slip. Yes, Wolfe said. A significant one. Outside, night pressed against the windows. Somewhere, a man who thought he was fighting for money was discovering that he'd been fighting for something far more dangerous, control. And the inheritance that never existed was now costing everyone more than it ever promised. Chapter 7, The Broken Heir. By the time Wolfe decided to summon the suspects, the brownstone had taken on that particular stillness it gets before something irreversible happens, like a courtroom 5 minutes before the jury files in, or a boxing ring just before the bell. The orchids steamed faintly, the house smelled of polish and inevitability, and Wolfe sat in his chair like a judge who'd already written the opinion but enjoyed the dissent. He had ordered me to make the calls. I enjoy that part. People say more on the phone when they think they're being polite. Jonathan Calder arrived first, of course. He was early, which is the sort of thing that looks like confidence until you realize it's fear wearing a watch. He paced, stopped, paced again, then finally sat, on the edge of the chair, like it might accuse him. Lillian came next, calm, observant, eyes taking inventory of the room the way a professional gambler studies a table. She nodded to me, ignored her brother, and chose a seat with a clear line to the door. Vera Klein arrived quietly, pale but composed, hands folded again in that practiced prayer. She avoided Jonathan's eyes and watched Wolfe as if he were a physician about to deliver a difficult diagnosis. Samuel Breen was last. He came in with a smile that didn't ask permission and a posture that suggested he still believed control was a thing you could hold in your hand. Inspector Kramer arrived just after him, scowling, coat still on, the city clinging to him like a bad smell. "All right, Wolfe," Kramer growled. "You said you had something." "I have several somethings," Wolfe replied mildly. "Please be seated." No one argued with him. That's one of Wolfe's underrated talents. Wolfe surveyed them, fingers steepled, voice calm and heavy. "Edmund Calder altered his will not to distribute wealth," he said, "but to neutralize influence. This has been established." Jonathan snorted. "You keep saying that like it excuses." "Silence," Wolfe said. Jonathan shut up. The word landed with weight. Wolfe continued, "In September, Mr. Calder discovered that decisions were being made, or urged, that endangered his company. He resisted. He was opposed." Breen crossed his arms. "Business disagreements aren't crimes." "No," Wolfe agreed. "But desperation can be." He turned his gaze, one by one, letting it rest just a fraction longer on Breen, then on Jonathan. "Mr. Calder did not expose what he discovered," Wolfe said. "He chose containment. He revised his will. He limited control. He set a trap." Lillian leaned forward slightly. "And someone walked into it." "Yes," Wolfe said. "But not immediately." The room tightened. After the will was executed, Wolfe went on, Mr. Calder grew fearful. He checked locks. He worried about documents. He confided selectively. He prepared. Vera's voice trembled. He was frightened. "Indeed," Wolfe said gently. Because he realized the danger had not been neutralized. Jonathan stood abruptly. "This is nonsense." Wolfe looked at him. "Sit down." Jonathan hesitated. That hesitation was the loudest sound in the room. He sat. Wolfe turned to Kramer. "Inspector, the medical examiner confirmed a heart attack." Kramer nodded. "That's right." "Did he confirm," Wolfe asked, "that it was unassisted?" Kramer frowned. "You don't have proof." "Not yet," Wolfe said. "I watched their faces." Jonathan's jaw was clenched. Breen's eyes were sharp but restless. Vera looked like she might faint again. Lillian looked sad. Wolfe shifted his attention to her. "Miss Calder, you supported your father's restraint in September." She nodded. "Because I believed it was right." "And because," Wolfe said, "you understood the danger." "Yes," she said softly. "He told me just enough." Jonathan turned on her. "You never said." "You never asked," she replied evenly. Wolfe allowed that to settle. Someone, Wolfe said, feared exposure more than consequence. Someone believed that if Mr. Calder lived long enough, containment would fail. Breen laughed shortly. "You're accusing us without evidence." "I am observing reactions," Wolfe said. For example, yours. Breen stiffened. I did nothing. Perhaps, Wolfe said. But you searched Miss Klein's apartment. Vera gasped. Breen's head snapped up. That's a lie. Wolfe nodded. Then you will not object to the police confirming that your key fits her lock. Breen's face darkened. Jonathan stared at him. Jonathan, I said quietly, you didn't know that, did you? Jonathan shook his head, slowly. No. Wolfe leaned back. We are approaching the core. Mr. Calder was not killed for money. He was silenced because he knew too much, and because he intended, eventually, to act. Kramer shifted. You're saying murder. I am saying motive, Wolfe replied. The silence stretched. It pressed. It weighed. Then Vera spoke, her voice barely audible. He told me, the truth would ruin someone he loved. All eyes turned to her. He didn't say who, she went on. But he said the person would destroy everything to prevent it. Jonathan's face went white. Vera, he said hoarsely, stop. That was the crack. The real one. Wolfe's eyes sharpened. Mr. Calder's fear was not abstract. It was personal. Jonathan stood, trembling now. You don't understand. Oh, I understand, Wolfe said softly. You believed control was survival. You believed exposure was annihilation. Breen stepped forward. This is outrageous. Wolfe ignored him. Mr. Calder's death occurred at his desk. Alone. Or so it appeared. Kramer leaned in. Wolfe. Inspector, Wolfe said, you will have your arrest. But not today. Jonathan laughed, a brittle, broken sound. You think you've won? No, Wolfe said. I think you have lost. Jonathan stared at him, then at Lillian, then at the floor. His shoulders sagged, not in guilt yet, but in something closer to despair. I never wanted the money, he said suddenly. I wanted the company to survive. Lillian's voice was cold. At any cost. Jonathan didn't answer. Wolfe folded his hands. The broken inheritance, he said, was not the will. It was the heir. No one spoke. Kramer cleared his throat. Wolfe, if you're holding back. I am arranging clarity, Wolfe said. Tomorrow, Inspector. When panic finishes its work. He dismissed them with a gesture. One by one, they left, Breen stiff and furious, Vera shaken, Lillian thoughtful, Jonathan hollow-eyed. When the door closed, the house exhaled. I looked at Wolfe. You almost had him confess. Wolfe shook his head. Not yet. Confession requires inevitability. And that comes when. Wolfe reached for his beer. When the truth offers the only remaining refuge. Outside, the city hummed, indifferent as ever. Somewhere, a man who thought himself indispensable was discovering how fragile that belief could be. The inheritance was shattered. The air was breaking. And the final reckoning waited, patiently. Chapter 8, Wolfe's Final Judgment. The thing about inevitability is that it never knocks. It just sits down and waits for you to notice it's already in the room. By the time Chapter 8 arrived, the brownstone felt different, quieter, tighter, like a courtroom after the judge has asked for closing statements. The orchids steamed faintly, Fritz had been warned not to interrupt unless the house caught fire, and Nero Wolfe sat in his chair with the calm of a man who had already finished the puzzle and was now enjoying the picture. Inspector Kramer arrived precisely on time, which told me Wolfe had told him exactly when to come. Jonathan Calder followed, pale and sleepless. Samuel Breen came in with his spine stiff and his jaw locked. Lillian Calder arrived last, composed but watchful. Vera Klein was already there, seated, hands folded, eyes fixed on Wolfe like he was the only solid object left in a collapsing room. Wolfe did not waste time. Inspector, he said, we may conclude. Kramer grunted. Let's hear it. Wolfe steepled his fingers. Edmund Calder did not die because of his will. He died because of what the will represented. Jonathan opened his mouth. Wolfe raised a finger. Jonathan closed it. In September, Wolfe continued, Mr. Calder discovered that his company was being pushed toward a course that would eventually expose serious improprieties, regulatory violations, concealment of liability, and a pattern of decisions designed to delay accountability. Breen shifted. That's speculation. No, Wolfe said. That is reconstruction. He turned his gaze, slowly, deliberately, to Jonathan. Mr. Calder's son believed control equaled survival. Exposure equaled annihilation. When Mr. Calder blocked the strategy, he became, regrettably, an obstacle. Jonathan's hands curled into fists. Mr. Calder altered his will, Wolfe said, not to reward or punish, but to remove leverage. He diluted control. He created delay. He intended to act, later, once the danger could be addressed without destroying the company. I nodded. That fit everything we'd seen. The missing draft. The fear. The locks. But, Wolfe went on, the danger did not wait. Kramer leaned forward. Get to the death. Certainly, Wolfe said. Mr. Calder was not poisoned. He was not struck. He suffered a heart attack, precipitated. Jonathan looked up sharply. Stress, Wolfe said. Induced deliberately. Breen scoffed. That's absurd. On the contrary, Wolfe replied. A man with known cardiac weakness can be pushed to collapse by confrontation, threat, and timing. No marks. No toxins. Only pressure. Wolfe turned to me. Archie. I stepped forward. Calder died at his desk. Furniture moved. Safe opened earlier. He wasn't surprised, he was confronted. Kramer frowned. By whom? Wolfe answered calmly. By his son. The room detonated. Jonathan lurched to his feet. That's a lie. Lillian stood too, eyes blazing. Jonathan. I did not kill him. Jonathan shouted. I went to talk to him. That's all. Wolfe nodded. Indeed. You went to argue. To intimidate. To force him to reverse course. Jonathan's voice cracked. He was ruining everything. And when he refused, Wolfe said gently, you pressed harder. You threatened exposure of consequences he had been containing. You pushed until his heart failed. Silence crashed down. I didn't touch him, Jonathan whispered. Touch was unnecessary, Wolfe said. Your words were sufficient. Kramer stood slowly. You're saying manslaughter. Wolfe inclined his head. At minimum. Jonathan sagged back into the chair, face in his hands. I didn't mean. No, Wolfe said. You meant control. Breen took a step forward. This is convenient. You're ignoring. Wolfe's gaze snapped to him. Mr. Breen, your role was advisory, persistent, and self-serving. You pushed the strategy. You searched Miss Klein's apartment to recover evidence that could implicate you. But you did not confront Mr. Calder that night. Breen's mouth opened. Closed. You relied on Mr. Calder's son, Wolfe continued. Which makes you culpable morally, and perhaps legally, but not the hand that broke the heart. Kramer nodded slowly. Accessory. Obstruction. Breen went gray. Vera spoke softly. Mr. Calder knew this would happen. Yes, Wolfe said. Which is why he prepared. But he miscalculated the urgency of fear. Jonathan looked up, eyes hollow. I loved him. Wolfe regarded him without cruelty. You loved what he protected. Kramer stepped forward and placed a hand on Jonathan's shoulder. Jonathan did not resist. As they led him toward the door, Lillian said quietly, You broke it. Jonathan paused. I know. When the door closed, the house seemed to breathe again. Kramer turned to Wolfe. You didn't call this murder. Because, Wolfe said, the law will choose its word. My task was truth. Kramer nodded once. You did your job. After he left, only the 5 of us remained, Wolfe, me, Lillian, Vera, and the orchids. Lillian spoke first. There really was no inheritance, was there? Wolfe shook his head. Only a safeguard. Vera exhaled shakily. And now? Now, Wolfe said, the truth will do what it always does. Damage. Lillian nodded. But not rot. She stood, offered Wolfe a brief, grateful look, and left. Vera followed, pausing at the door. Thank you, she said. Wolfe inclined his head. She closed the door gently behind her. I sat on the edge of the desk, exhausted. You ever think about moving faster? No, Wolfe said firmly. Speed is the enemy of accuracy. I smiled. You broke an inheritance without touching a dime. Wolfe lifted his beer. Inheritance, he said, is not money passed down. It is responsibility passed forward. Outside, New York went on being New York, taxis honking, lights burning, secrets changing hands. I looked around the office. The chair. The orchids. The man who never moved and yet somehow always arrived first. The broken inheritance, I said. Wasn't the will. Wolfe nodded. It was the heir. I closed my notebook. And for once, the case stayed closed.